The emergency transmission crackled through the void of space, carried by quantum entanglement communicators across 17 star systems. On the bridge of the Terran Federation flagship Prometheus, Admiral Sarah Chen stood motionless as the alien voice filled the command center with its desperate plea. "This is Commander Zalthek of the Vorthan Republic." The translation software rendered the clicking and whistling sounds into crisp human speech. "Our homeworld of Vorth Prime is under siege by the Kethmar Horde. We have lost 60% of our fleet. Our orbital defenses have fallen. We invoke Article 7 of the Galactic Defense Pact and formally request immediate military assistance from any allied species capable of response." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Chen's officers exchanged glances, waiting for her decision. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Defense Pact for 3 years, ever since first contact with the peaceful Vorthan Republic had led to formal diplomatic relations. The humans had been eager to prove themselves worthy allies to these ancient civilizations that had been traveling the stars for millennia. "Communications? How long ago was this transmission sent?" Chen asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez checked his instruments. "Based on quantum signature decay, approximately 14 hours ago, Admiral. Even at maximum jump speed, it would take us at least 36 hours to reach the Vorth system." Chen nodded grimly. By the time any human ships arrived, the battle would likely be over. The Vorthons would either be victorious or extinct. Still, humanity had made a promise when they signed the Defense Pact. They would honor it, even if they arrived too late to make a difference. "Signal the rest of Battle Group Alpha," Chen commanded. "We're jumping to Vorth Prime immediately. Also send word to Earth Command. They need to know we're potentially heading into a war zone." What Admiral Chen didn't know was that 3 star systems away, Captain Marcus Tank Thompson was already receiving the same distress call aboard the human deep space reconnaissance vessel, Wanderer. Unlike the massive dreadnoughts of Battle Group Alpha, the Wanderer was a small, fast ship designed for long-range scouting missions. Thompson had been conducting routine patrol operations along the outer rim when the Vorthan transmission reached his ship. Thompson was a veteran of the asteroid wars, the last major conflict humanity had fought before achieving faster-than-light travel. He was known throughout the Terran fleet for his unconventional tactics and his ability to think quickly under pressure. More importantly, he understood something that the Galactic Defense Pact members had never learned about humanity. Humans didn't just fight to win battles, they fought to utterly destroy their enemy's will to continue fighting. "Helm, plot a course for Vorth Prime, maximum speed," Thompson ordered as he studied the tactical data flowing through the ship's computers. "Communications, patch me through to Earth Command on Priority Alpha Channel." Within minutes, Thompson was speaking directly with Admiral Harrison, the head of Terran Fleet Operations. The conversation was brief and to the point. "Admiral, we're 36 hours closer to Vorth Prime than Battle Group Alpha," Thompson reported. "I'm requesting permission to proceed independently and provide immediate assistance." Harrison's image flickered on the view screen, his weathered face showing concern. "Tank, you're talking about taking one ship against an entire alien armada. The intelligence reports we have on the Kethmar suggest they're using technology centuries ahead of anything we've seen." "With respect, sir, that's exactly why they won't expect what we're about to do," Thompson replied with a grin that his crew had learned to both love and fear. "Besides, someone once told me that when your enemies outclass you, you don't try to fight fair, you fight dirty." Admiral Harrison was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You have a point, Captain. Very well, you're authorized to proceed. But Tank, remember that you're not just representing yourself out there. You're representing all of humanity. Our reputation with our new alien allies depends on how we handle this situation." "Understood, Admiral." Wanderer out. As the transmission ended, Thompson turned to his crew of 35 specialists, each of them hand-picked for their expertise and their ability to think outside conventional military doctrine. They had worked together for 2 years, and Thompson trusted each of them with his life. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation," Thompson began, activating the ship's main view screen to display the intelligence data they had received about the Kethmar horde. "Our new Vorthan friends are about to become extinct unless someone does something about it. Unfortunately, the cavalry won't arrive for another 36 hours, which means it's up to us to buy them some time." The crew studied the information in silence. The Kethmar were a warlike species that had been conquering and enslaving other civilizations for over 1,000 years. Their ships were massive, heavily armed, and protected by energy shields that could absorb incredible amounts of punishment. Their tactics were straightforward but effective. Overwhelming firepower applied without mercy until their enemies surrendered or died. "Captain," spoke up Commander Lisa Park, Thompson's second-in-command and the ship's chief tactical officer. "Looking at these specifications, a single Kethmar battleship outguns our entire vessel by a factor of 20 to 1. Their smallest escort ships are twice our size." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say," Thompson replied, his grin widening. "Because that means they're going to underestimate us completely. Lieutenant Vasquez, what's our current load of antimatter torpedoes?" Chief Weapons Officer Elena Vasquez checked her inventory displays. "We have a full complement, sir. 48 Mark 7 antimatter torpedoes, plus our railgun ammunition and defensive systems." "Good. Now here's what we're going to do," Thompson said, moving to the tactical display and beginning to outline his plan. "We're not going to try to fight them ship to ship. That would be suicide. Instead, we're going to do something that no civilization in the galaxy has ever attempted against the Kethmar horde." The crew leaned forward, listening intently as their captain continued. "We're going to make them afraid," Thompson said simply. "According to the intelligence files, the Kethmar have never encountered an enemy that used psychological warfare as a primary tactic. They don't understand the concept of terror as a weapon. Well, it's time they learned." Over the next several hours, as the Wanderer raced through hyperspace toward the Vorth system, Thompson's crew worked frantically to implement their captain's unconventional plan. They modified their antimatter torpedoes with special proximity sensors, reprogrammed their electronic warfare systems for maximum disruption, and prepared special broadcast packages that would be transmitted directly into the Kethmar communication networks. Meanwhile, on Vorth Prime, the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The planet's blue-green continents were shrouded in smoke from orbital bombardment, and the remaining Vorthan ships fought a hopeless running battle against an enemy that outnumbered them 10 to 1. Commander Zalthek stood in the ruins of his command center, his six-armed form covered in purple blood from wounds suffered when the facility had been hit by enemy fire. "Status report," Zalthek clicked to his communications officer, his voice filled with the resignation of someone who knew death was approaching. "The Fourth Fleet has been destroyed," came the reply in the musical tones of the Vorthan language. "Admiral Kurthon's flagship was lost with all hands 20 minutes ago. We have 7 ships remaining, all heavily damaged. Enemy forces are preparing for final planetary assault." Zalthek closed his 4 eyes and tried to think of something, anything, that might save his people. The Vorthans had been a peaceful species for over 2,000 years, focused on art, philosophy, and scientific advancement. Their military existed primarily for defense against natural disasters and the occasional pirate raid. They were completely unprepared for the savage efficiency of the Kethmar war machine. "Any word from our allies?" Zalthek asked without much hope. "The Zalani Republic has expressed their sympathies but states that their fleet is too far away to provide assistance," his aide reported. "The Crystalline Collective has offered to accept refugees if any escape the system. The human response has not yet been received." Zalthek had almost forgotten about the humans. They were the newest members of the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only a few decades ago. Their technology was primitive compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy, and their military was untested in any conflict larger than small skirmishes within their own solar system. Still, they had seemed eager to prove themselves as reliable allies. "Keep monitoring all channels," Zalthek ordered. "If we're going to die today, I want to know that someone will remember what happened here." High above the burning planet, the Kethmar fleet hung in space like a cloud of death. Over 300 ships of various sizes formed a loose sphere around Vorth Prime, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had reduced dozens of worlds to ash and rubble. At the center of the formation, the massive command dreadnought Devastator served as the flagship for war leader Krextar, supreme commander of this particular Kethmar war host. Krextar was typical of his species, 9 feet tall, covered in chitinous black armor that was as much natural evolution as protective gear, and possessing a mind that understood only strength and conquest. He had personally led the destruction of 17 civilizations during his 50-year career, and the conquest of the Vorthons would be his 18th victory. Status of the surface bombardment, Krextar growled to his tactical officer, his voice like grinding stone. "Orbital defense platforms have been eliminated," came the reply. "Population centers are being systematically destroyed. Estimated 90% reduction in military capability within 6 hours. Excellent. Maintain bombardment schedule. Once their ability to resist has been completely eliminated, we will begin harvesting operations." Krextar studied the tactical displays showing the positions of his fleet. Everything was proceeding according to standard Kethmar doctrine. Overwhelming force applied without pause until the enemy was utterly broken. It was at that moment that the Wanderer dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vorth system. Captain Thompson stood on his bridge, looking at the massive enemy fleet displayed on his tactical screens. Even having prepared himself mentally for this moment, the sight was sobering. The Kethmar ships were huge, dark, and undeniably powerful. Each one looked like it could reduce the Wanderer to scrap metal without breaking stride. "Well," Thompson said quietly, "I guess it's time to see if humans really are as crazy as everyone thinks we are. All stations, prepare for Operation Thunderclap. Remember, the goal isn't to destroy their fleet. The goal is to make them so angry and confused that they make mistakes we can exploit." "Captain," Lieutenant Vasquez reported, "all weapon systems are ready. Antimatter torpedoes are loaded and standing by. Communications are prepared to begin broadcast operations on your command," added Lieutenant Rodriguez. Thompson nodded and settled into his command chair. "All right, people, let's go introduce ourselves to the Kethmar Horde. And let's make sure they remember this day for the rest of their very short lives." The Wanderer began moving deeper into the system, accelerating toward the enemy fleet at maximum speed. On the surface of Vorth Prime, Commander Zalthek's communication officer suddenly straightened with surprise. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission on all emergency frequencies. It's from a human vessel." The message that followed would change the course of galactic history. The transmission from the Wanderer cut through the chaos of battle like a blade through silk. Captain Thompson's voice, calm and confident despite the overwhelming odds, reached every ship in the system simultaneously. "This is Captain Marcus Thompson of the Terran Federation vessel Wanderer. To our Vorthan allies currently engaged with hostile forces, be advised that Earth cavalry has arrived. We suggest you withdraw to minimum safe distance and prepare to observe a demonstration of human problem-solving techniques." On the bridge of his damaged cruiser, Commander Zalthek stared at his communications console in disbelief. A single human ship against the entire Kethmar armada? It had to be a mistake, or perhaps the stress of battle had finally caused him to lose his sanity. "Confirm that transmission," Zalthek ordered his communications officer. "How many human ships are in the system?" "Sensors detect only one vessel, Commander. Small craft, approximately 300 meters in length. Mass suggests light cruiser classification by human standards." Zalthek felt his hopes plummet. He had been expecting a fleet, or at least a battle group. Instead, humanity had sent a single scout ship. Either they grossly underestimated the Kethmar threat, or this was some sort of token gesture to fulfill their treaty obligations before retreating. Aboard the Kethmar flagship, war leader Krextar received similar reports about the new arrival. His tactical officers quickly analyzed the human vessel and determined that it posed no significant threat to their operations. "A single enemy scout ship," Krextar rumbled with something that might have been amusement. "These humans must be either very brave or very stupid. No matter. Dispatch a hunter squadron to destroy it quickly, then resume bombardment operations." 6 Kethmar destroyers, each one twice the size of the Wanderer, broke formation and began moving to intercept the human ship. Their captains were eager for the honor of making first contact with this new species, even if it would only last long enough to reduce them to debris. Captain Thompson watched the approaching enemy ships on his tactical display and smiled grimly. Everything was proceeding exactly as he had hoped. "Tactical, confirm target locks on all 6 approaching vessels," Thompson ordered. "Communications, begin Phase 1 of the psychological warfare protocol." "Targets locked, sir," reported Lieutenant Vasquez. "All torpedoes ready for launch." "Beginning transmission now, Captain," confirmed Lieutenant Rodriguez. What happened next had never been attempted in recorded galactic history. Instead of opening fire immediately or attempting to negotiate, the Wanderer began broadcasting directly into the Kethmar communication networks. But these weren't standard military frequencies or diplomatic channels. Using human electronic warfare techniques, Thompson's communications officer had hacked into the Kethmar ship's internal systems and was now transmitting directly to their crew quarters, command centers, and even their personal communication devices. The message was simple but effective, a compilation of humanity's greatest military victories throughout history, from ancient battles to recent conflicts, all narrated in perfect Kethmar language by the ship's AI. The transmissions showed human warriors charging into impossible odds and emerging victorious through sheer determination and innovative tactics. They showed human cities refusing to surrender even when facing complete annihilation. They showed the aftermath of conflicts where humans had been pushed too far and had responded with terrifying efficiency. But the most disturbing part of the transmission wasn't the historical footage. It was the psychological analysis that accompanied it, explaining in clinical detail how humans approached warfare differently from any known species in the galaxy. Where other civilizations fought to achieve specific military objectives, humans fought to completely break their enemy's will to resist. Where others sought to minimize casualties and infrastructure damage, humans were willing to accept massive losses to achieve total victory. Where others followed predictable tactical doctrines, humans specialized in doing the unexpected. The effect on the Kethmar crews was immediate and profound. For over 1,000 years, they had conquered other species through superior technology and overwhelming force. Their enemies had always been predictable. They fought according to established military principles, they surrendered when facing certain defeat, and they could be intimidated into submission through displays of power. But these humans seemed to operate according to completely different rules. The historical footage showed them achieving victory against superior opponents through tactics that bordered on insanity. More disturbing still, the psychological profiles suggested that humans actually became more dangerous when they were losing, not less. On the bridge of the lead Kethmar destroyer, Captain Vexitor struggled to maintain his composure as he watched the human transmissions. His crew was becoming visibly agitated, clicking and chittering with nervousness as they absorbed the implications of what they were seeing. "Maintain course and speed," Vextor ordered, though his own confidence was beginning to waver. "It's just psychological warfare. These humans cannot possibly be as dangerous as their propaganda suggests." That was when Captain Thompson launched his first antimatter torpedo. The weapon streaked through space toward the lead Kethmar destroyer, but it wasn't aimed at the ship itself. Instead, Thompson had programmed it to detonate approximately 1 kilometer in front of the enemy vessel, close enough to trigger their defensive systems, but not close enough to cause actual damage. The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a miniature sun, and the energy signature registered on every sensor in the system. But more importantly, the blast had been carefully calibrated to produce a very specific effect. It created a subspace resonance pattern that interfered with Kethmar shield generators, causing them to fluctuate and occasionally fail for brief periods. "All torpedoes fire when ready," Thompson commanded. "Target pattern Delta 7. The Wanderer unleashed its full complement of antimatter torpedoes in a carefully orchestrated sequence. Each weapon was programmed to detonate at a specific distance from its target, creating a cascading series of subspace disruptions that played havoc with Kethmar technology. None of the explosions were close enough to cause direct damage, but the cumulative effect was to create a zone of electromagnetic chaos that made it nearly impossible for the enemy ships to maintain their targeting locks or coordinate their movements. Captain Vextor watched in growing alarm as his ship's systems began malfunctioning. Shield generators cycled on and off randomly, weapon-targeting computers produced contradictory data, and his navigation systems seemed to be receiving interference from an unknown source. "Engineering, what is happening to our systems?" Vextor demanded. "Unknown, Captain," came the reply from his chief engineer. "Our equipment is functioning normally, but something is causing massive interference with our subspace fields. We've never encountered anything like this before." That was when Thompson implemented the second phase of his plan. While the Kethmar ship struggled to deal with the electromagnetic chaos caused by his torpedo barrage, the Wanderer began moving in a pattern that defied all conventional military logic. Instead of maintaining a safe distance and engaging in long-range combat, Thompson ordered his ship to accelerate directly toward the enemy destroyers. But rather than following a straight intercept course, the Wanderer began weaving through space in an apparently random pattern, using its superior maneuverability to avoid the increasingly erratic fire from the confused Kethmar ships. "Captain," Lieutenant Park said with some concern, "we're moving directly into their weapons range. Even with their targeting systems compromised, they're bound to score hits eventually." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Thompson replied with a confidence that his crew had learned to trust even when they didn't understand it. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, begin Phase 2 of the Psychological Warfare Protocol." The second wave of transmissions was even more unsettling than the first. Instead of historical footage, the Wanderer began broadcasting detailed tactical analyses of current Kethmar fleet positions, complete with assessments of their weaknesses and suggestions for how a competent enemy might exploit them. The transmissions were formatted as if they were internal human military communications, discussing the Kethmar forces as if they were already defeated enemies whose destruction was simply a matter of choosing the most efficient method. More disturbing still, the broadcast included what appeared to be communications between multiple human ships, suggesting that the Wanderer was merely the advance scout for a much larger force that was approaching the system. The conversations discussed deployment strategies for Operation Extermination and included casualty estimates that assumed the complete annihilation of all Kethmar forces in the system. Captain Vextor realized that his squadron was now completely surrounded by the electromagnetic interference created by the human torpedo barrage, effectively cutting them off from communication with the main fleet. His ships were blind, confused, and increasingly demoralized by the psychological warfare broadcasts. "All ships, maintain formation and continue toward the human vessel," Vextor ordered, though he was no longer certain that his commands were being received by the other destroyers. "We will destroy this enemy through superior firepower." But Thompson wasn't finished. As the Wanderer continued its seemingly suicidal charge toward the Kethmar squadron, he implemented the most audacious part of his plan. "All stop," Thompson commanded. "Hold position at exactly 2 kilometers from the lead enemy vessel." The Wanderer came to a complete halt directly in front of the Kethmar destroyer, well within range of every weapon system on the enemy ship. For a moment, both sides simply stared at each other across the void, neither quite sure what was supposed to happen next. Then Thompson opened a direct communication channel to Captain Vextor. "Attention, Kethmar vessel." Thompson's voice cut through the static of the electromagnetic interference. "This is your first and only warning. You have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces from this system and return to wherever you came from. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why humanity is not to be trifled with." Vextor couldn't believe what he was hearing. A single human ship, outnumbered and outgunned by impossible odds, was issuing an ultimatum to his entire squadron. The sheer audacity of it was almost incomprehensible. "Human captain," Vextor replied, his voice filled with disbelief. "You are either insane or suffering from some form of neural malfunction. You cannot possibly believe that one ship can defeat 6 Kethmar destroyers." "You're absolutely right," Thompson admitted cheerfully. "One ship can't defeat 6 destroyers. That's why I didn't bring just one ship." That was when the rest of Thompson's plan revealed itself. The electromagnetic interference that had been plaguing the Kethmar ships suddenly intensified dramatically, and their sensors began detecting energy signatures that suggested multiple human vessels decloaking around the squadron. The signals were perfectly consistent with a coordinated ambush by a full battle group of human warships. In reality, Thompson had used his ship's electronic warfare systems to create sophisticated sensor ghosts, false signals that mimicked the appearance of additional vessels. Combined with the chaos created by the antimatter torpedo detonations, the effect was completely convincing to the confused Kethmar sensors. Captain Vextor watched in horror as his tactical display showed human ships appearing all around his squadron, moving into perfect attack positions. According to his instruments, his 6 destroyers were now surrounded by at least 20 human vessels, including several that registered as heavy cruisers. "Impossible," Vextor whispered. "Our intelligence reports indicated that the humans have only a small fleet. Where did all these ships come from?" The answer came in the form of another transmission from Captain Thompson. This one broadcast to the entire Kethmar fleet. "War Leader Krextar," Thompson's voice carried across the system with crystal clarity. "My name is Captain Marcus Thompson of Earth. I'm here to inform you that your war crimes against the Vorthan people end today. You have 2 choices. Withdraw your forces immediately and never return to this system or face the consequences of attacking our allies." On the bridge of the Devastator, Krextar stared at his tactical displays in growing confusion. His hunter squadron had been cut off by some form of electromagnetic interference, and now his sensors were detecting what appeared to be a significant human fleet operating in the outer system. None of this made sense, according to his intelligence reports about human military capabilities. "Analysis," Krextar growled to his tactical officer. "Uncertain, war leader. Our sensors detect multiple human vessels, but the interference makes it difficult to obtain accurate readings. The energy signatures are consistent with a battle group of at least 20 ships, possibly more." Krextar considered his options. The Kethmar horde had built its reputation on overwhelming superior force and predictable tactical doctrine. They had never encountered an enemy that used such sophisticated electronic warfare or psychological manipulation. More importantly, they had never faced an opponent that seemed genuinely eager to engage in combat against impossible odds. For the first time in his 50-year military career, war leader Krextar began to wonder if he had finally encountered an enemy that might actually be dangerous. War leader Krextar had commanded Kethmar forces for 50 years, and in all that time he had never experienced uncertainty in combat. The Horde's doctrine was simple and effective. Identify the enemy, calculate the force required to destroy them, then apply twice that amount of firepower until nothing remained. It had worked against 17 different civilizations across the galaxy, but these humans were proving to be unlike any enemy the Kethmar had ever faced. "War leader," his communications officer reported with obvious distress. "We're receiving multiple transmissions from the human vessels. They're not attempting to negotiate or surrender. Instead, they're broadcasting what appears to be tactical assessments of our fleet composition and suggestions for improving our defensive positions." Krextar's mandibles clicked together in agitation. "Explain." "The humans seem to be analyzing our formation and pointing out vulnerabilities in our deployment. They're discussing our ships as if they were studying specimens for academic research, rather than preparing for battle." The war leader moved to his tactical display and studied the electromagnetic chaos surrounding his hunter squadron. 6 of his finest destroyers had been effectively neutralized by a single enemy vessel using techniques he had never encountered before. More disturbing still, his sensors now indicated the presence of a substantial human fleet that had somehow appeared without triggering any of his early warning systems. "Long-range sensors," Krextar commanded. "Are there additional human reinforcements entering the system?" His sensor officer checked his instruments twice before responding. "Negative, war leader. No new contacts detected entering the system. However, the electromagnetic interference is making detailed scans difficult." That was when Captain Thompson escalated his psychological warfare campaign to its final phase. The transmission that reached every ship in the Kethmar fleet was unlike anything they had ever received. Instead of threats or demands for surrender, it was a detailed historical analysis of every military engagement the Kethmar had fought over the past century. The humans had somehow obtained complete tactical records of Horde operations and had analyzed them with terrifying thoroughness. But the most unsettling part wasn't that the humans knew so much about Kethmar military capabilities. It was their assessment of those capabilities. "Analysis of Kethmar tactical doctrine reveals a species adapted for conflicts against technologically inferior opponents," Thompson's voice explained in perfect Kethmar language. "Standard operational procedure relies on overwhelming firepower applied through predictable formations designed to intimidate rather than to achieve maximum tactical efficiency. Psychological profile indicates a culture that has never been required to adapt to innovative enemy tactics or to cope with opponents willing to accept massive casualties to achieve strategic objectives." The transmission continued with a point-by-point breakdown of how human military doctrine differed from standard galactic norms. Where other species fought to minimize losses and achieve specific territorial objectives, humans were prepared to sacrifice everything to completely destroy their enemy's ability to continue fighting. Where other civilizations followed established rules of engagement, humans specialized in rewriting those rules mid-battle. Most disturbing of all, the broadcast included detailed specifications for human military technology. Instead of hiding their capabilities, the humans were openly explaining exactly what weapons they possessed and how they intended to use them. The antimatter torpedoes, it turned out, were the least impressive items in their arsenal. "Currently deploying in this system," Thompson's voice continued, "are Mark VII antimatter warheads, quantum disruptor mines, subspace implosion devices, and our latest development, adaptive nanobiological agents designed specifically for Kethmar physiology." The last item caused a stir of panic throughout the Horde fleet. Biological weapons were forbidden by every galactic treaty and were considered weapons of absolute last resort. The fact that humans had developed such weapons and were casually mentioning their deployment suggested a species that played by completely different rules than the rest of galactic civilization. War leader Krextar felt something he had never experienced in 50 years of combat: genuine uncertainty about the outcome of a battle. His tactical officers were reporting increasing confusion and anxiety among the fleet crews, and his hunter squadron remained trapped in the electromagnetic dead zone created by human weapons. Options, Krextar demanded of his senior staff. We could withdraw the main fleet to a safe distance and bombard the human positions with long-range weapons, suggested his tactical officer. Their electronic warfare capabilities seem most effective at close range. That would mean abandoning the hunter squadron, Krextar pointed out, 6 destroyers and their crews. Alternatively, we could advance the entire fleet to support the hunters and engage the human force directly. Krextar considered this option. According to his sensors, the human fleet consisted of approximately 20 vessels, most of them smaller than his destroyers. Even accounting for their apparent technological advantages, the Kethmar should be able to achieve victory through superior numbers and firepower. But something nagged at him about the human behavior. No rational military commander would openly broadcast their tactical capabilities to an enemy force. No sane species would develop biological weapons and then casually mention their deployment. Either the humans were completely insane, or they were so confident in their abilities that they didn't consider the Kethmar to be a serious threat. The decision was made for him when Captain Thompson implemented the final phase of his operation. All Kethmar vessels, Thompson's voice cut through the confusion with terrifying calm. You now have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal from this system. After that time expires, we will demonstrate why the Terran Federation was invited to join the Galactic Defense Pact despite having such a small fleet. 60 seconds. War leader Krextar had conquered star systems in less time than that, but now he was being given 60 seconds to decide whether to retreat from a battle he should easily win. War leader, his communications officer reported with growing panic. We're detecting massive energy buildups from the human vessels. Whatever they're preparing to do, the power signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Krextar watched the countdown timer on his tactical display. 50 seconds, 40, 30. His entire career, his reputation, everything he had built over 5 decades of conquest hung in the balance. 20 seconds. All ships, Krextar commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Prepare for full assault on human positions. We will show these newcomers why the Kethmar horde is feared across the galaxy. 15 seconds. War leader, his sensor officer called out with obvious alarm. The human energy signatures are spiking beyond our measurement capabilities. Whatever they're about to do, our computers can't even calculate the potential destructive yield. 10 seconds. That was when Captain Thompson revealed the true genius of his plan. At exactly 0 on the countdown, every human vessel in the system simultaneously fired what appeared to be their primary weapons. Massive energy beams lanced through space toward the Kethmar fleet, accompanied by swarms of antimatter torpedoes and exotic weapons that the aliens' sensors couldn't even classify. The Kethmar crews braced for impact, expecting to be destroyed in the opening salvo of what would surely be the most devastating battle in their civilization's history. Instead, every single weapon missed. Not by small margins due to targeting errors, but by enormous distances that suggested complete incompetence on the part of the human gunners. Antimatter torpedoes detonated harmlessly in empty space. Energy beams passed kilometers away from their intended targets. Exotic weapons exploded spectacularly without damaging anything more significant than cosmic dust. For a moment, the Kethmar fleet hung in space, completely bewildered by what had just happened. Had the humans suffered a massive system failure? Were their weapons malfunctioning, or had they somehow missed an entire fleet with every shot they fired? The answer came in the form of laughter. Captain Thompson's voice echoed across the communication channels, filled with genuine amusement at the confusion he had created. "War Leader Krextar," Thompson said between chuckles, "did you really think we would waste good ammunition on target practice? What you just witnessed was a demonstration firing using holographic projections and sensor decoys. We wanted to see how your fleet would react to the threat of overwhelming firepower." The truth hit Krextar like a physical blow. There was no human battle group. There were no exotic weapons or biological agents. There was just one small ship commanded by a human who understood something that no Kethmar had ever learned. Sometimes the threat of violence was more effective than violence itself. "You see," Thompson continued, his voice now taking on a lecturing tone, "humans have a saying, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. For the past hour, you've been making nothing but mistakes, and we've been recording everything for our tactical databases." The full scope of the human deception became clear as Thompson explained how his single ship had neutralized 6 destroyers, paralyzed an entire fleet, and gathered detailed intelligence on Kethmar military capabilities using nothing more than electronic warfare, psychological manipulation, and carefully orchestrated theater. The electromagnetic interference that trapped your hunter squadron, that was caused by modified antimatter torpedoes programmed to create subspace disruptions. Your own weapons could have produced the same effect if you understood the underlying physics. The multiple ship contacts your sensors detected, holographic projections and sensor decoys that any competent electronic warfare specialist could have seen through if they knew what to look for. War Leader Krextar listened to the explanation with a growing sense of humiliation. His mighty fleet had been outmaneuvered by a single enemy vessel using tactics that were simultaneously brilliant and absurdly simple. "But here's the important part," Thompson continued. And now his voice carried a note of steel that made it clear the demonstration was over. "While you've been trying to figure out what we're really capable of, the actual Terran battle group has been traveling toward this system at maximum speed. Admiral Chen and her dreadnoughts will arrive in approximately 18 hours, and she's going to be very unhappy about what she finds here." The mention of additional human forces caused another stir of panic among the Kethmar crews. If a single ship could cause this much chaos, what could an entire battle group accomplish? "So here's what's going to happen," Thompson announced with finality. "You're going to gather up your hunter squadron, withdraw your entire fleet from this system, and return to whatever hole you crawled out of. In exchange, we won't follow you home and demonstrate what human weapons can really do when we're not just playing games." For long minutes, the Kethmar fleet hung in space, while War Leader Krextar wrestled with the most difficult decision of his career. Retreat would mean admitting defeat to a vastly inferior force. But continued engagement carried risks that he was no longer certain he could calculate. The decision was made for him when Commander Zaltek's voice suddenly cut across the communication channels. "Human Captain Thompson," the Vorthan commander said in his musical language, "we have monitored your engagement with the invaders. Your tactics were most educational. However, I must inform you that additional Kethmar forces are approaching the system. 3 more fleets, each larger than the one currently present." Thompson's response was immediate and confident. "Understood, Commander Zaltek. Thank you for the intelligence update. War Leader Krextar, I hope you heard that. You now have 3 choices. Retreat immediately and avoid the reinforcements entirely. Wait for your friends to arrive and face the combined wrath of Human Fleet Command, or explain to your superiors why you lost 4 entire fleets to a species that's been in space for less than a century." The psychological pressure was perfectly calculated. Krextar realized that regardless of what the humans were really capable of, he was now trapped in a situation where any decision could lead to disaster. Retreat might save his current forces but would require him to admit defeat. Waiting for reinforcements risked an even larger catastrophe if the humans proved as dangerous as they claimed. But there was a fourth option that Thompson had cleverly made available. Counter-proposal, Krextar announced after several minutes of consideration. The Kethmar Horde withdraws all forces from this system and establishes this region of space as neutral territory. In exchange, we request detailed information about human tactical capabilities for our military archives. Thompson's laughter returned, but this time it carried a note of respect. You're a clever one, war leader. You want to learn how we beat you so you can adapt your tactics for future encounters. I can appreciate that kind of professional curiosity. However, Thompson continued, I'm afraid that's not how this works. Human tactical information is classified, and we don't share our secrets with people who try to commit genocide against our allies. Here's my final offer. Withdraw completely and immediately, and we'll consider this a learning experience for both sides. Try to negotiate further, and Admiral Chen will arrive to find whatever's left of your fleet scattered across several cubic light-years of space. The ultimatum was clear and final. War leader Krextar looked around his bridge at his officers, saw the fear and uncertainty in their eyes, and made the only rational decision available to him. All ships, he commanded with as much dignity as he could manage, begin withdrawal from the system immediately. Signal the approaching fleets to abort their mission and return to base. As the massive Kethmar fleet began its humiliating retreat, Captain Thompson opened a private channel to Commander Zalthek. Commander, this is Thompson. Your people are safe for now, but I strongly recommend beginning immediate evacuation procedures for your civilian population. The Kethmar will be back eventually, and next time they'll be prepared for human tactics. Understood, Captain Thompson, Zalthek replied with obvious gratitude. We cannot adequately express our appreciation for what you have accomplished here today. A single human vessel defeated an entire Kethmar armada without firing a shot in anger. Actually, Commander, I think you misunderstand what just happened here, Thompson said with a final smile. We didn't defeat the Kethmar. We just reminded them that the universe is full of things they don't understand yet. Sometimes that's enough. As the Wanderer watched the Kethmar fleet disappear into hyperspace, Thompson's crew began the process of shutting down their electronic warfare systems and recovering their sensor decoys. In 18 hours, Admiral Chen would arrive with Battle Group Alpha and find a quiet system with grateful allies and a reputation for human military prowess that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The age of humanity, as a minor player in galactic politics, was over. The era of humans as the species you definitely didn't want to anger had officially begun.